Let's turn to you first, Eddie. Can you let us know what the timetable is for this ballot, the timetable for possible strike action if it happens, and what you feel is really at stake here for your members and our rail network?
Hi, Liam. So this dispute's been a long time sort of in the making. We've been through the pandemic period where our members made lots of changes to their working practices and worked heroically through the pandemic to keep the country moving. Many of our members have had pay freezes now. Some of them are in the third year of a pay freeze. We've changed how we've worked. We've made lots of sacrifices to help the railway keep going, and we've been working with the industry and the Rail Industry Recovery Group, putting forward ideas on how to help the industry recover. But that's turned into a forum where we're told now the intention is to strip $2 billion out of the rail industry to make that money come out through stripping out jobs and attacking terms and conditions and keeping wages low. And we've had the biggest fall in real living standards now since records began. Wages have been declining in real terms for 30 years. And our members, frankly, have had enough. And although it's been referred to as a national strike, I have to point out this is mainly Network Rail and the train operating companies that are associated with control from the DfT. We don't have this in Wales, where we've had a settlement because there was a different political decision taken there. We don't have this in other parts of the country where we've achieved pay awards. It's primarily the companies associated with the Rail Industry Recovery Group. So we've put forward lots of ideas on how they can save money. We've told them many ways they could make efficiency savings, but they're intent on making those efficiency savings in removing safety critical jobs, in slashing maintenance standards and safety schedules, and in keeping wages down and tearing up terms and conditions for railway workers.
Thanks for making the qualification about other parts of the country, Eddie. That's appreciated. The union has said that you believe removing maintenance jobs, 2,500, you say, is safety critical. Have you put that to Network Rail? And as and when you did, what did they say about that specific safety aspect?
So we've put forward a number of proposals to Network Rail, including how they could carry out their maintenance work more efficiently by bringing work that's currently contracted out in-house and done by people that have already got other duties to do. So that's productivity, and it would save millions and millions of pounds, up to £212 million if we look at renewals. We've given them options for cutting bonuses within the company that we don't think need to be there. And that's across the board for frontline workers as well as people more senior. We've pointed out that director pay is out of control in Network Rail. 70 of the highest paid civil servants in the country are Network Rail employees. If you strip their money back just to what the Prime Minister's being paid, you'd save nearly £6 million a year. I'll give you an example. They've got 8 non-executive directors. They spent nearly £750,000 for those people to attend 8 meetings over 1 year during a pandemic. Those meetings would have been like this on Zoom or on Teams or whatever, and it's profligate and it doesn't need to happen. So we've demonstrated many ways they could save money and improve service, but they're intent on cutting maintenance standards and stripping out frontline safety critical jobs. We think that's dangerous for 2 reasons. We're going through a massive change in technological advancement in rail, in digital terms and in what we call intelligent infrastructure. The railway's changing rapidly. So we're embedding all of this new technology, and at the same time, we're trying to do a complete reorganisation and strip out thousands of frontline jobs and cut back on maintenance work. It's like trying to perform an operation on yourself whilst riding a bike. It doesn't make sense. And we think all of these things combined are a worry. We're not saying all of their plans are dangerous. We do think that some of the types of new infrastructure and new assets that are coming in could reasonably mean you've got to maintain them less. That's true. But in the whole, we think this is driven by cost. They've told us it's driven by cost. They've told us this is the number we've been tasked with cutting out. And so all of our plans are geared towards that. So it's kind of putting the horse before the cart.
And Eddie Dempsey of the RMT, just briefly, because I want to bring the other guests in, but I do want to ask you this. the RMT, you'll be weighing your words carefully in your press releases and so on. The biggest rail strike in history. What does that mean? What could we be looking at here if your 40,000 member ballot goes for strike action?
So just to be clear, what we're saying is that our members want a pay rise and they're resolute. They want a pay rise. Some of them are in the third year of a pay freeze. We want a guarantee of no compulsory redundancies. We're not saying we're opposed to change in general, but we're saying that we want to do it in a controlled way. And we're saying that we want no imposed detrimental changes to how we work. We want to negotiate and agree how that's done. We've also got concerns about our pensions more broadly, and we're worried about that too. But the reason we're saying this could be the biggest strike in history is because of the strength of feeling and the appetite from our members to go into dispute. We've been very patient. Our members have been very, very patient. You've got to appreciate none of our members wanted to get into any kind of serious industrial action during a pandemic. We're absolutely committed to delivering key workers to the health service, to their care homes and where they needed to be. And now we feel that after all the clapping and all the praise we got during that period, we're just simply seen as a cost that has to be stripped out. So we're not asking for the world on a plate. We're just simply saying people need to see their wages rise with inflation going in the direction it's going. They need to control and have a say in how changes are happening. And we want the industry side to take seriously some of the proposals we've put forward to make efficiencies and to make savings for the rail industry as a whole.
Let's now bring in employment lawyer from Howard Kennedy, James Townsend. James, employment law, trade union law is very different from the 70s. I talked about the 70s at the top of the show, but that doesn't mean that there can't be widespread strikes in this country.
Well, yeah, people are entitled to strike. What the RMT now need to do is they need to ballot all of their members, 40,000 of them. They'll need a 50% turnout and they'll need 40% support. The government's already been very quick to condemn this. Listen very carefully to what Eddie was saying before the break. I mean, ultimately, he's explained this isn't fully about health and safety issues, is it? It's about pensions, it's about cost of living, it's about salaries, it's about much wider issues here. And there's not going to be a lot of support amongst commuters for this. We can understand their position, but it seems like quite an early stage to be talking about balloting for strike action. There hasn't been a collective process. So far, there have been opportunities for people to, take applications for voluntary redundancy if they so wished. And ultimately, with 15 billion having been pumped into the railways to keep them going during the pandemic, cuts need to be made. So it'll be interesting to see what support the membership have, whether strike action actually does take place and what the reactions are going to be from members of the public.
Exactly so. And on that point, James, it's a pleasure now to bring in Luca Barbarossa. Luca's an actor who relies on trains from Crowbridge to London for work, often very time sensitive. Luca, thanks so much for joining us here on GB News. We just heard from the RNT union. If they were to strike, if they were to impose the biggest rail strike in British history, would they have your sympathy?
Absolutely not. Obviously, I live in Crowborough, which is in East Sussex. And also to get into work, into London, they've cut our train service every 2 hours, which I think is absolutely disgraceful, because I wrote to my MP, I spoke to her, I basically said, people rely on this service, it's a rural service, we need it to get into London. I think it's absolutely disgusting that they're trying to strike again, because obviously we've lost out, prior with COVID and the pandemic.
So you don't buy their notion that it's partly about wanting to uphold safety standards. Eddie Dempsey said it was partly about their own work conditions and pensions and pay and so on. But you think that's all it's about?
Well, I think because our line is a branch line, so it's quite rural, so they could never have driverless trains because obviously they'd always have to have a conductor. So I don't see what it could all be about, if that makes sense. Obviously, they've cut quite a lot of staff due to COVID and the pandemic. But I don't understand why they're striking now, because they're always sort of recruiting more staff. So I don't understand why they've started a strike now.
Let's bring you in now, Louise. What do you make of this? Do you think if the RMT do impose this strike action, if their members vote for it. Do you think they'll take the public with them? Do you think there'll be public sympathy?
Oh, Liam, I think it'll be really mixed. I do have sympathy with the rail workers, but in this country, and in any country, we need decent infrastructure. We need it to be safe. We need it to connect our businesses throughout the UK. So it needs support, and what that has lacked through the pandemic is support. People are working from home. Therefore, there isn't the demand for the rail. Therefore, they're looking at cutting their costs. It's really difficult. So the message of people going back to the office, supporting public transport, has to be up there. But I do think, tip of the iceberg, we'll see this with other businesses. And
you mean more industrial action, more disputes over
well,
pay?
not necessarily that, but redundancies.
Yeah.
And this was one to watch, because we talked about this with the potential for stagflation. And the government is really proud of its low unemployment figures. And we could see that start to tick up, and there is the worry. And next week, people will feel, employers and employees, those NIC increases in their wage packets.
National insurance contribution increases, and you mentioned there the S word, which we often talk about here on The Money, stagflation, that combination of high price rises, inflation and economic slowdown,
low growth,
stagnation, as we had in the 1970s. Let's go back to James Townsend at Howard Kennedy. James, I'm old enough to remember the 70s, and I remember widespread industrial action in the 70s sparked a whole raft of laws limiting trade union power during the 1980s. We're not there yet, are we? But could we be?
I don't know of any plans to amend the piece of legislation that relates to the ability to bring action. But, you know, there are rules around bringing action, and those rules would have to be adhered to for there to be a relevant strike action, for it to be authorised, and for workers to get protection against, say, unfair dismissal and that sort of thing. So the bar's reasonably high. As I mentioned before, there has to be a 50% turnout of all eligible voters, and 40% have to support the action. Look, if workers want to go ahead and strike, then they can. It's very disruptive. There won't be necessarily a lot of support for these people doing this amongst commuters, but there we have it. I don't think there's any suggestion of reform at the moment.
And let's give the last word to Luca, a commuter, somebody who comes in from Crowborough in East Sussex. Luca, you wouldn't support strike action. You think it's unfair. So what is your message to Eddie Dempsey of the RMT, who joined us at the top of the show?
My message to him is basically, you know, you're going to wreck people's lives. You know, I obviously have to rely on that train service to get to London. It's, you know, it's really rural, and you need to have a look, you know, at the figures, because it's not very reliable as it is at the moment. And also 2 hours a day is absolutely ridiculous. Loads of people have wrote to our local MP, and we've had no response whatsoever. So yeah, I think it's absolutely disgusting that they want to strike. And, you know, when are they going to put the train service back to every hour in the day?
Welcome to the GB News YouTube channel. You can watch us live 24 hours a day, catch up on your favourite shows, and join in the conversation in the comments below.
Don't forget to subscribe, and you'll never miss any of our exclusive content.